Hey, John Lee here, and we got another update with your Coca-Cola's to be less white training. We've got a little more information on it and exactly what happened. I think it would be a good idea to kind of take a look at it and see what's going on here. So, obviously, I got my whiteboard up here. I like to take notes, and so this is what I have found. So, this particular diversity training course was created by DeAngelo, and this course was called Confronting Racism, and it was publicly listed as a series in this diversity training, so-called diversity training going on through corporate America right now. And I had a personal experience with that I'll talk about soon, and I'm hoping that this type of exposure will actually get some people educated on how racist they really sound and how discriminatory and ludicrous these types of trainings are, and how racist they are towards white people and how offensive they are. And we really need to take a serious look. Anytime you have a serious problem, it requires serious conversation. And unless people are sincerely willing to look at this seriously and have a serious conversation about it, there will never be any accountability for big business or for anyone. And that's why here lately I'm promoting, taking all the responsibility on myself for doing things the way that I think will better myself and my family and my community. And if everybody isn't doing those things, then they're actually part of the problem. They are actually hurting their children and their families and their society if they're not making the best choices, the most responsible choices that will make a better life for all of us, a better community. So this course, Confronting Racism by DeAngelo, if you don't know who that is, I would highly recommend that you take a look at it. If you work a corporate job, you're probably already familiar with this type of thing, and you've probably already had it force-fed down you. I've talked with a couple of people on Facebook, opened up a couple of dialogues and discussions about it, and a lot of people say that maybe they disagree with the racist training, but because it's required by your employer, that they would, typically and generally just go along with it because they need their job. And so evidently, we're not really getting the correct meaning out of life if we're willing to work for people that have values that differ from ours so greatly that to our core, we know that something's not right. And that's how we all know that being racist is wrong, and why this To Be Less White Coca-Cola diversity training by DeAngelo is obviously racist. So it was removed from the LinkedIn platform. And I haven't exactly heard why. I read that there was some backlash from a third-party content creator that asked that it be removed. But this stuff is so mainstream, and I did have a personal experience with this. And it's not just this one training video. It's a series of be less white, be less confrontational, be less. It's really this mainstream system of anti-male, anti-white racism that's trying to cancel a culture that there was never even a need or reason to cancel it in the first place. All in the name of diversity, inclusion, unconscious bias, and discrimination. Okay, everything that has worked for mankind up until the 1960s, the late 1800s, early 1900s has worked. And as a species, we've managed to continue our reproduction and our species and evolution to where we are today. All these changes in society are horrible for mankind. They're a bad idea for all of us. And so a Coke spokesperson said, these are the words of them, not me, that they did confirm that the course was part of, quote unquote, part of a learning plan to help build an inclusive workplace. how can you help build an inclusive workplace when you're telling part of your employees that they are pieces of crap and somehow they need to be less white? And I'm trying to figure out, really, why and how? How are people supposed to, we're not supposed to be discriminated. It's totally racist. And it's been pulled off of the LinkedIn platform, I would say, because it is racist. They went on to say an inclusive work, but they also said the video circulating on social media is from a publicly available LinkedIn series and is not a focus of our company's curriculum, quote unquote. And so if it's sounds to me like, Coke is just basically trying to do what all these bigger companies are trying to do, which is cop out of the responsibility and the accountability of providing a workplace, a professional workplace, and a career for people where they can be free of oppression and discrimination and racism. And now you're going to go and tell all these white people that they need to be less white and how bad they are. So where is the accountability for these bigger companies if they can just say, oh, that's part of a series, that's not our core values, it's just a cop-out. And there is somebody's job at these big companies to look through this material and make sure that it meets the legal requirements as training to go out as, lawful and illegal. And employees that have to be confronted with this type of BS is stirring up a lot of confrontation, a lot of conflict. And you have a lot of people with different perspectives on the issue. But, I mean, seriously, where's the accountability? There has to be accountability. You can't just, the whole backlash of all of this, the irony in all of this is that a lot of these corporate companies implemented a lot of this be less white type of diversity training in the aftermath of the George Floyd shooting and a lot of the BLM, Black Lives Matter, protests and stuff that was going on. So a lot of these corporate businesses were implementing these trainings, claiming that it was to promote diversity and inclusion with integrity and equity, which I spelled wrong. Excuse me. But, real people see through bullcrap like this. When you're confronted about something that you are responsible for and liable for, and you put the blame on another company or say that, hey, we implemented that and it's racist, but, it really wasn't our fault. And it was Robin DeAngelo's fault. It was LinkedIn's fault. This was public information. And actually, here's another quote, what they said. So, this statement doesn't really sit well with me because of my personal experience I had with this situation. This is from Coke's spokesperson that said, our Better Together Global Learning Curriculum is part of a learning plan to help build an inclusive workplace. It is comprised of a number of short vignettes, each a few minutes long. The training includes access to LinkedIn learning on a variety of topics, including on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which all sounds really nice until you start having people from the inside actually, being disgruntled. You start having feelings of oppression and discrimination and hostile work environment and retaliation. So what do you do if you actually had this kind of training and you were a white person? Well, that's what happened to me working at Comcast and Xfinity. This was my career. We had a series of these trainings that, in my opinion, was disguised by this idea of, in this aftermath of all the Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd shooting and all of this, like critical race and culture canceling bullshit. I think you should call it cancer culture because it is a crock of crap. But in that, all these big companies had a fear of, being accused of discrimination and racism. And so they implemented all this to avoid lawsuits of racist actions and behaviors in the workplace, claiming that it was actually integrity training, which is really insulting to people who aren't racist. So this Robin DeAngelo character of trying to cancel and confront your internal racism and the unconscious bias bullcrap that's being crammed down people's throat, telling them that they're bad just because of the color of their skin, is really shameful, and it's not good. It's not good for companies. It's not good for employees. It's not good for our children. It's not good for our society. It's no good for anybody. So there really needs to be accountability. So in my situation, I didn't like this type of training. I didn't agree with it. I was highly offended by it. I had a supervisor who was an African American and a coworker, teammate that was an African American, both standing there when I said something to my supervisor about having these, extreme feelings of being offended and being called a racist at my place of employment at 8 o'clock in the morning before I'm getting ready to go talk to customers and be in their homes and being a face of the company and trying to be warm and friendly, because as part of your integrity training, there's other things that you really need to focus on that are part of the company's curriculum, and that is being warm and friendly. It's delivering, a better than excellent customer experience. And how am I supposed to do that when I'm completely offended and appalled that my employer is going to tell me that I'm racist? I was born that way, and there's nothing that I can do about it unless I first acknowledge that I am racist, and then I can begin to start to unlearn those horrific behaviors. So I brought it up. I said, I'm not doing this. Okay. And so the irony is how these big companies implemented all of this to avoid being sued for this type of thing. And now what happens when it's implemented? If nobody says anything, no problem. If just one or two people say something, you're probably going to get fired. But now a lot of people are, actually filing lawsuits against Coca-Cola because this shit is discrimination. It is racist. It is bullshit. And there is no accountability when these bigger companies can just fluff it off or act like, you're the arrogant white privileged asshole. So after I said something to my supervisor that, I was so upset, I just felt like I needed to take a break, probably go home. I thought that, this to my core, I was shaken and rattled. And I felt like, I deserved an apology because something inside me knew for a fact that this was not right. And so it wasn't much longer after that. I went home and ended up going back to work. But it wasn't much longer after that I was being investigated for the conversation that I had with my supervisor about this racist diversity unconscious bias training that I was being actually forced. This was required. This was not voluntary. And none of this training has done actually any type of measurable behavioral change. They haven't seen any good come of this. They've seen nobody's behaviors of all this training actually make a difference. And so to me, it's unreal. It's unprofessional. It's unconstitutional that if I say something about you calling me a racist, and the training that you're providing me is actually been confirmed as racist material, I bring it up and I speak up and speak out about it. Next thing you know, I'm under investigation. And shortly after that, I'm terminated. And so, that's really how crippling this type of mentality and this kind of power that we give to these big companies is. My entire family, my career, my life, my home, every part of who I am was riding on the integrity of going to work every day and working for a company that actually cares more about people than they do about things. To me, what was important wasn't the money. It wasn't losing my job and my career. It was standing up for what I believed in, which was knowing that racism is wrong and that I wasn't going to allow my employer to actually call me a racist or require me to take training that implies that I'm a racist or that I am a prejudiced person or that I was born that way. There's no way that that's professional, and there's no place for it in the workplace. And I actually promote all of these things. I obviously promote real, true equity. And unless they're doing that, they're not on the same page as I am. And so it wasn't losing my job and my career and supporting my family and doing these trainings just because I had to have my job that meant the most to me. What means more to me than anything in this world is living with purpose. Okay, and it should for you too. If you're not living with purpose, then how would you know if a big business came along and started force feeding you something saying how bad you were in an unconstitutional way? You would have no clue that it was even going on. So that's the kind of woke Coke really needs. I'm John Lee, and if you like this video, this is your update on the Coke Be Less White. They should really be ashamed of themselves. Hit that like and subscribe button for me. Ring the bell for notifications. I'm hoping at some point, this kind of thing will change, because what if this does happen to you? What type of affirmative action, what type of representation is there out there for these employees who were forced to take this mandatory anti-white rhetoric training? Where's the representation? Where's the equity there? Is there, I tried to call a couple of attorneys for legal advice. Still haven't heard back. Now, I guarantee you that if it had been a black person or African-American person in that situation where they were being told to be less black, and they said something about it being racist, and then they were investigated and terminated, it'd be all over the news. The entire country and the world would be in an uproar, yet I can't even get one attorney to even call me back. So that's why I have a YouTube channel, so I can actually create these videos, spell out word for all the dummies out there that obviously don't know their A from a hole in the ground. And, real exposure can happen. So I'm really hoping that through these videos, I'm able to reach other people and send a more powerful message than anything, which is create the life that you want, that has purpose and meaning. Otherwise, you're just going to get bullied and bullnosed by big tech companies like this that push people around and then act like they ain't got no responsibility. It wasn't their fault, and please don't hold them liable. I say screw that. Ring the bell for notifications. If you like these videos, I'm on to the next one.